5 weeks before my wedding, my mom left a voicemail that cracked something inside me. "Honey, we can't make it. Todd's yacht party is the same day. You understand, right?" I'm Camille, 31, biomedical engineer. The kind of daughter who got straight A's and still couldn't get a framed photo on the living room wall. My family had always treated me like a background extra in someone else's highlight reel. My sister Brianna got the spotlight, the praise, the first row seats. I got leftovers and silence. So when they chose a yacht over watching me walk down the aisle, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I put on my grandmother's veil, and I married the man they'd laughed at. They had no idea who he actually was. But 4 million television viewers were about to find out. I grew up in Millbrook, North Carolina, one of those towns where everybody knows your lawn and your business. My father, Glenn Ashford, owned an insurance agency on Main Street. My mother, Judith, considered herself the social backbone of the Millbrook Country Club, which really meant she organized the annual golf brunch and never let anyone forget it. Then there was Brianna, 3 years older, homecoming queen, knew how to work a room before she could drive. She'd walk into Sunday brunch and every head turned. My mother would beam like she'd personally sculpted her. Me? I liked math. I liked silence. I liked the biology lab at school where things made sense and nobody graded you on your smile. I got straight A's every semester. The night I brought home my first perfect report card, my father glanced at it, nodded, and said, "Good. But you should learn to talk to people like your sister does." I was 12. My mother decorated the living room with framed photos, a shrine to the Ashford family's best angles. I counted once, 11 photos of Brianna, solo shots, pageant shots, prom shots, 2 of me. Both were family group photos where I happened to be standing in the frame. I told myself it was just aesthetics. Brianna photographed better, that was all. Then Brianna got engaged to Todd Kensington, son of a local real estate family, visible money, big smile, firm handshake. My mother redecorated the living room wall the week the engagement photos arrived. My 2 group photos came down. Brianna's engagement portraits went up. I stood in that living room during Thanksgiving, scanning every frame. Not a single one had my face in it anymore. I didn't say anything. I'd learned early. In my family, silence wasn't peace. It was a ranking. The pattern wasn't subtle. It was just quiet enough that I could pretend it wasn't there. Until it was impossible to pretend anymore. I finished my master's in biomedical engineering at Duke. 2 years of late nights, caffeine-stained notebooks, and a thesis on cardiac valve modeling that my advisor called exceptional. I sent my family the graduation date 3 months early, circled it on a calendar, texted reminders. The morning of the ceremony, my father called. "Sweetheart, I've got a meeting with a major client. Can't reschedule." The client was Todd Kensington. I found that out later. My mother texted, "Migraine. So sorry, honey. Take pictures." Brianna didn't respond at all. I walked across that stage, shook the dean's hand, and looked out at the audience. Row after row of proud families, balloons, tears, and in the seats I'd reserved, nothing. Empty chairs with little name cards no one would ever read, except one. In the far left of the front row, my grandmother Ruth sat in her wheelchair, clapping so hard her rings rattled. 80 years old. She'd arranged her own ride from the nursing home 2 hours away. "I wouldn't miss this if they set the building on fire," she told me after, squeezing my hand. That evening, I called home. My mother picked up, voice airy. "How was it, sweetie? I'm sure it was nice. It's just a graduation, though. Brianna didn't even have one, and she's doing fine." I hung up and opened Facebook. There was my mother, at a spa resort, arm around Brianna, matching robes. Caption: "Nothing beats mother-daughter time." Posted 6 hours ago. While I was walking across a stage, she couldn't be bothered to watch. That was the year I stopped expecting anything. But I hadn't yet stopped hoping. I met Declan Mercer at a medtech conference in Austin. He was presenting on AI-assisted diagnostics, something about training algorithms to read imaging scans faster than radiologists. I was there for the cardiac device panel, but his session ran over into my lunch break, so I stayed. He spoke like someone who'd built things with his hands before he built them with code. No jargon walls, no ego. He wore a flannel shirt and boots that had actual mud on them. After the talk, I asked him a question about edge cases in valve imaging. He lit up. We talked for 40 minutes and missed lunch entirely. 6 months later, we were a couple. He drove a dented Ford F-150, lived in a modest rental outside Raleigh, and described his work as a small software company, medical stuff. I didn't press. I fell in love with the man who remembered how I took my coffee and read my published papers before I even mentioned them. When I brought him home to meet my family, my father lasted about 90 seconds. "So what do you do, Declan?" "I run a small company, medical software." My father nodded once, the same nod he gave my report cards, and turned to Todd. "Tell me more about the lakefront resort project. 12 million, right?" In the kitchen, my mother pulled me aside. "He seems fine. At least he has a job, but compared to Todd..." She trailed off and shook her head. Brianna waved at Declan from across the room, said, "Hey," and returned to her phone. On the drive home, Declan's phone buzzed relentlessly. He silenced it. "Just work stuff." I didn't ask. That was how I loved, without interrogation, without suspicion. It was also the gap my family would later wish I'd closed. Declan proposed on a Tuesday, in my lab, at 6:14 p.m. I was running calibration tests on a prototype heart valve sensor. He walked in with 2 coffees and a small velvet box. The ring was a blue sapphire, not a diamond. "You told me once you liked the ocean more than jewelry stores," he said. "So I went with blue." I said yes before he finished the sentence. We decided on Meadow Creek Farm, a converted property on the outskirts of Raleigh, rolling fields, old oak trees, string lights between the barns. It was the place my grandmother Ruth used to take me berry picking every summer when I was small, the happiest geography of my childhood. I called my mother to share the news. "Oh, congratulations, honey. What's his name again? Declan?" Right. Well, good for you." A pause. Then, "Oh, did I tell you? Brianna just got invited to the governor's charity gala. Can you believe it?" I sent the save the date card the next week. Cream cardstock, hand-lettered, with a watercolor of the farm. I mailed it to my parents, to Brianna, to every relative I could think of. 2 weeks passed. No reply. Not from my father, not from my mother, not from Brianna, not even a text saying, "Got it." I told myself the mail was slow, that they were busy, that they'd call any day now. Declan watched me check my phone one evening and said, "You don't have to wait for anyone's permission to be excited." I smiled and told him I wasn't waiting, but I was. I was still sitting at that invisible table, hoping someone would pull out a chair for me. 5 weeks before the wedding, I called to confirm. My mother answered on the 4th ring. There was music in the background, something jazzy, something expensive. "Mom, the wedding. You got the invite?" Yes, we did. It's beautiful, the little card." A pause. Then a breath. The kind she took before delivering bad news wrapped in a ribbon. "Honey, I need to tell you something. That same weekend, Todd is hosting a party on his yacht at Lake Norman. Very important people. Your father has clients coming." "Mom, it's my wedding." "I know, sweetheart, I know. But the yacht thing is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And your little farm ceremony, honestly, you could FaceTime us, or send a video afterward. We'll watch every second, I promise." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. My father picked up the extension. Business voice, clipped consonants. "Camille, don't make this dramatic. Todd's got major clients on that boat. I need to be there. You're having your thing at a farm. How many people are even coming? Your lab friends? Declan's parents from Montana?" He chuckled. "I don't want to sit on hay bales for 3 hours." I was quiet for 5 seconds, maybe 10. Long enough that my mother said, "Camille, you there?" "I'm here," I said. "Okay." I hung up. 20 minutes later, Brianna texted, "Don't be mad, okay? It's just logistics. I'm sure your little barn thing will be adorable." Little barn thing. Something shifted in my chest. Not anger. I knew anger. This was sharper, cleaner. Like a bone finally snapping after years of bending. Clarity. For the first time I saw the math clearly, and the numbers had never been in my favor. That night, I sat on the back porch. The air smelled like pine and coming rain. I made a list in my head. Not on paper. I'd spent my whole career quantifying things, and some data sets don't need a spreadsheet. My master's graduation, empty chairs. My 25th birthday, a text from my mother at 11:47 p.m., clearly an afterthought. The day I filed my first patent, a microsensor for post-surgical cardiac monitoring, I called home. My father said, "That's great, kiddo. Hey, Todd just broke ground on a new subdivision. Isn't that something?" My engagement announcement, 3 weeks of silence. And now, my wedding, traded for a yacht party. I called my grandmother. It was late, but Ruth Ashford didn't believe in sleeping before midnight. "Grandma, they're not coming." A long sigh. Then, "I know, baby, I know." Her voice was steady, the way it always was. "I'll be there if I have to roll that wheelchair 200 miles. But them, sweetheart, I can't make water flow uphill. I keep thinking if I just, you've been just your whole life. You've just tried harder, just called more, just showed up with a bigger smile. And what did it get you?" I didn't answer. "Exactly," she said. "Now go plan your wedding for the people who actually chose to be there." I hung up and called Laura, my best friend since college. "Change of plans," I told her. "No father walking me down the aisle. I'm walking alone." Laura was quiet for a second. "Good. You've been walking alone your whole life anyway. At least now you'll own it." I didn't know then that the small, quiet, no-drama wedding I was planning would air in front of 4 million people. 3 weeks before the wedding, Brianna FaceTimed me. She was poolside, a filter softening her face into something porcelain. Sunglasses pushed up, iced coffee sweating in her hand. "You're not actually mad, right? Mom said you hung up on her." "I'm not mad. I just stopped asking." She laughed, that light social media laugh she'd perfected. "Oh, come on. Don't go all dramatic. Todd's yacht party is going to be gorgeous. Mom already bought a new dress. It'll be so fun." "Fun for you." "Cam, seriously. It's not personal. It's scheduling. And honestly," she tilted her head like she was about to offer career advice, "your little venue is cute, very Pinterest, but it's not exactly an event people rearrange their lives for, you know?" I looked at my sister, at the carefully curated version of her that lived behind a screen, and I felt something close to pity. "I hope you have a great time, Brianna." "Wait, are you being passive-aggressive right now?" "No, I'm being done." I ended the call. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Mom." "Camille, Brianna just called me in tears. She said you were cold and rude. What is wrong with you?" She was trying to be supportive. "She called my wedding a Pinterest project, Mom." "Oh, don't twist her words. She's sensitive. You know how she is. Why do you always have to make things difficult?" I could hear my father in the background, muttering something I couldn't quite catch. Probably agreement. "I have to go, Mom." "Camille." I hung up, and something settled inside me. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of something that would eventually become peace. The decision to stop performing for an audience that was never watching. My father called the next morning. He used his boardroom voice, the one he reserved for negotiations and family members who needed correcting. "Camille, sit down. We need to talk like adults." "I'm standing, Dad. Go ahead." "Todd has a major deal closing on that yacht. Partners, investors, people who matter. I need to be there. This isn't about feelings. This is business." "And my wedding is what, exactly?" "Your wedding is..." He paused, recalibrating. "Look, I love you. You know that. But let's be realistic. You're having it at a farm. Who's coming? Lab coworkers? Declan's folks from Montana?" He said Montana the way people say bargain bin. 85 people who actually want to be there. I'm not going to sit on a folding chair in a field for 3 hours when I could be securing our family's future on Todd's boat. "Our family's future," I repeated. "You mean your client list." "Don't be sensitive, Camille." There it was, the word they all used. Sensitive. As if noticing you're being discarded is a character flaw. "Dad, I'm going to say this once. You're choosing a business dinner over your daughter's wedding. You don't need my permission for that, but you also don't get to call it love." Silence. the kind that hums. "You've always been difficult," he said quietly. Then he hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone still warm in my hand. Through the window, the afternoon sun was catching the tops of the pines, turning them gold. That was the last time I heard my father's voice before the wedding. The next time he called, his tone would be completely different. But that was still days away, and a version of me that didn't exist yet. That night, I sat on the bedroom floor with a photo album I hadn't opened in years. There was one picture I kept coming back to, all four of us at the beach when I was 8. My father's arm around my shoulder, my mother laughing, Brianna building something in the sand, and me, gap-toothed, sunburned, grinning so wide it hurt, convinced I was the luckiest kid alive. The family in that photograph never existed. Or maybe it did, briefly, before the math of who was useful and who was ornamental took over. I cried. Not about the wedding, about the understanding that I'd spent 23 years trying to earn a seat at a table that was never set for me. Declan found me there. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down on the floor beside me, back against the bed frame, and waited. After a while, "You don't need them there to know you're worth showing up for." "I know, but it still hurts." "Yeah." He put his arm around me, and I leaned into him, into the one person who'd never asked me to be anything other than exactly this. A woman sitting on a floor, crying over a family photo that was more fiction than memory. Then he said, "There's something I need to tell you. About the wedding. About the company. Some things I haven't—" I shook my head. "Tomorrow. Whatever it is, tell me tomorrow. Tonight I just want to sit here." He nodded. Kissed the top of my head. Let it go. I wouldn't understand until later why he looked so conflicted, or why the thing he wanted to say would have changed the way I understood the last 2 years of my life. But that was tomorrow's problem. Meadow Creek Farm the day before the wedding looked like something out of a dream I hadn't known I was having. Fairy lights strung between the old oak trees, wildflowers in mason jars on long wooden tables, a hand-carved archway where the ceremony would happen, built by Declan's father, a carpenter from Montana who'd driven 2 days to deliver it personally. 85 guests confirmed, friends, colleagues, Declan's parents, quiet, kind people who hugged me like I'd always been their daughter. His mother pressed a hand to my cheek and said, "He's never been this happy. Thank you for that." My grandmother arrived mid-afternoon, a medical transport van, a wheelchair, and Ruth Ashford, 83 years old, spine like a general's, holding a garment bag across her lap. "Open it," she said. Inside, a lace veil, yellowed with time, her wedding veil from 60 years ago. "Wear this. Only heirloom worth a damn in this family," she winked. "Back when I was prettier than Audrey Hepburn." I laughed and cried at the same time. Around 5 o'clock, Marcus Reeves, Declan's business partner and best man, pulled me aside near the caterer's tent. "Camera crew's all set up," Declan confirmed. I blinked. "Camera crew?" "For the company thing. Internal footage." He smiled, easy and practiced. I looked across the field. 3 cameras, professional rigs, boom mics, a woman with a clipboard directing angles. One of the crew wore a jacket with a small embroidered logo I couldn't read from that distance. "Declan said his company likes to document stuff," I told Marcus. "Marketing content or whatever." Marcus nodded a little too quickly. "Yeah, exactly. Marketing." At the time, I thought the cameras were the smallest detail of my wedding. I was wrong about that. The morning of the wedding, I woke at dawn and walked the grounds alone. The mist hadn't burned off yet. The farm looked silver and quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I was barefoot in the grass, trying to memorize how this felt, this fragile, impossible calm, when I noticed the cars. 2 black SUVs parked at the far edge of the property, near the service entrance. Tinted windows. Drivers in dark suits leaning against the hoods, scrolling their phones. I found Marcus by the coffee station. "Who are those people? The SUVs?" He glanced over, unbothered. "Some of Declan's old colleagues, don't worry about it." "They look like they're guarding a senator." Marcus laughed. "Tech people dress weird. You know that." By mid-morning, guests were arriving. A slow, cheerful stream of people carrying gift bags and wearing their Sunday best. But scattered among them, I noticed faces that didn't fit. A silver-haired woman in a silk blazer. A man with a watch that caught the light from 50 feet away. They moved with a particular kind of ease, the kind that comes from being accustomed to rooms where everyone else is nervous. Declan introduced me to the woman. "Camille, this is Margaret. She was my mentor when I was first starting out." Margaret shook my hand warmly. "He's told me everything about you. The cardiac sensor work. Brilliant." I thanked her. I didn't ask what she did. That was how I operated. I took people at face value and didn't mind them for resumes. After I walked away, Margaret turned to Marcus. I didn't hear it then. Marcus told me later. "She really doesn't know?" Marcus shook his head. "That's exactly why he chose her." Laura cornered me in the bridal suite while I was having my hair pinned. "Okay, I need to ask you something." She closed the door, lowered her voice. "The camera guys out there, the ones Declan said were for internal company footage? Yeah? Cam, they have boom mics, a drone, grade A cinema cameras. One of them is wearing a badge." She pulled up a photo on her phone, zoomed in. The badge had a logo. Clean, corporate, recognizable. Nexus TV. Nexus TV, the national network. Not a marketing team. "Maybe they hire freelancers from there," I said. "Media people float between gigs." Laura stared at me. "You're literally a scientist. Where's your curiosity?" "Getting married in 4 hours. Ask me tomorrow." She threw her hands up and went to check on the flower arrangements. I sat in front of the mirror, veil draped over my shoulders, grandmother's lace against my collarbones, and told myself it didn't matter. Declan's company filmed things. Tech startups were dramatic like that. I didn't need to understand every detail of his work life on our wedding day. Meanwhile, outside, I later learned the documentary director was standing behind the barn, talking to his lead cameraman. Episode airs at 9 tonight. Live highlights go to social by morning. A tech CEO getting married at a farm. This is gold. He adjusted his earpiece. "Make sure you get the processional from 2 angles. The network wants emotion." 200 miles south, on the shore of Lake Norman, a yacht was being prepped with champagne towers and string quartets. My parents were ironing outfits. My sister was choosing earrings. None of us knew that in 6 hours, both events would collide on the same screen. I know what some of you are thinking. "Camille, why didn't you just tell your parents straight out?" I did. Dozens of times. In different words, different tones, different years. But there comes a moment when you realize you can't convince someone to love you the way you deserve. If this story is hitting something real for you, if you've ever been the invisible one at your own family's table, hit that like button. Not for me. So the algorithm puts this in front of the right person, someone who needs to hear it. Now, back to the wedding. At 4:30 in the afternoon, 2 very different scenes were unfolding 200 miles apart. On Lake Norman, Todd Kensington's yacht slid away from the dock. 60 guests, crystal glassware, a string quartet playing Sinatra. My father shook hands with investors in a new navy blazer, grinning like he'd just closed the deal of his life. My mother sipped Veuve Clicquot and posted an Instagram story. A slow pan across the lake, golden light on water, captioned, "Best night ever." The timestamp, 4:32 p.m. At Meadow Creek Farm, I stood at the end of a gravel path lined with wildflowers. 85 people in wooden chairs, string lights beginning to glow in the fading sun. My grandmother in the front row, veil in her lap, mouthing "go." No father beside me, no arm to hold. I adjusted my grandmother's lace veil, took a breath, and stepped forward. 1 foot, then the next. Gravel under my shoes, faces turning, friends standing, Laura pressing her hand to her mouth. And at the end of the aisle, Declan, in a simple gray suit, watching me with an expression I'd never seen from anyone. Not admiration, not awe, recognition, like he was seeing someone he'd known for longer than one lifetime. I walked alone, and for the first time, it didn't feel like absence. It felt like arrival. Behind me, 3 cameras tracked every step. A drone hummed somewhere above the oak trees. The crew worked in silence, capturing the kind of footage that doesn't need narration. On the yacht, my father was telling an investor, "My older daughter married Todd Kensington. You know Todd? The lakefront project? Nobody asked about the younger daughter. Nobody ever did. I found out what they said later, secondhand. The kind of details that arrive like shrapnel weeks after the explosion. On the yacht, somewhere between the second champagne course and dessert, a woman in pearl earrings turned to my mother. "Judith, didn't I hear your younger daughter is getting married today?" My mother set down her glass, smoothed her dress, smiled the smile she reserved for questions she hadn't prepared for. "Oh yes, Camille wanted something rustic. A farm, somewhere outside Raleigh." She flicked her wrist. "We tried to talk her into something nicer, but she's stubborn." "And you're here instead?" "We had prior commitments. Anyway, she's marrying some IT fellow. Sweet enough, I guess. We're not sure he can afford much more than that barn." The woman in pearls raised her eyebrows but said nothing. Brianna appeared at my mother's elbow, phone in one hand, champagne in the other. "Camille's fine, Mom. She's used to doing things solo. She actually prefers it. It's like her whole personality." She laughed lightly, performatively. My father stood 3 feet away, drink in hand, nodding, not defending, not correcting, just existing in the same gravitational field as Todd's money, orbiting it like a man who'd forgotten he had a second daughter getting married at that very moment. Todd leaned over to a colleague. "My father-in-law's a great guy, best insurance portfolio in the region." Glenn smiled like he'd been given a medal. I was putting on my grandmother's veil in a candlelit barn, checking my lipstick in a handheld mirror, Laura squeezing my hand so hard I thought she'd break it. They were clinking glasses on a yacht. And somewhere between those two scenes, a television network was preparing to air everything. The ceremony was simple. That was the point. No 12-piece orchestra, no choreographed entrance. Just the two of us under an oak tree, surrounded by people who chose to be there. Declan held my hands and spoke without notes. "I don't have a big speech. You're a scientist. You like data. So here's my data. Every single day with you is better than the one before. That's the best trend line I've ever seen." The audience laughed. I laughed. And then I cried. Not the pretty kind, the real kind. The kind where your mascara gives up. "Did you just use trend line in your wedding vows?" I said. "Statistically significant emotional commitment," he said. More laughter. His mother wiped her eyes. His father put an arm around her. I kept my vows short too. "I don't need you to save me. I just need you to stay." He whispered back. "Staying is easy when you're the view." The officiant pronounced us married. We kissed. The crowd stood. My grandmother banged her wheelchair armrest and shouted, "Finally!" The cameras caught all of it, every angle, every tear. The drone circled overhead like a slow-motion witness. And in the middle of it, a detail that only I saw, 4 chairs in the second row, family section, wrapped in ivory ribbon. Empty. I looked at them once. Only once. Then I turned away. Those chairs would stay empty for the rest of the night. And I decided, standing there in my grandmother's veil with my husband's hand in mine, that this was the happiest moment of my life. I was not going to let 4 empty chairs define it. Not anymore. Not ever again. The reception spilled across the farm like something from a painting. Lanterns in the trees, music floating over the grass, people dancing on a wooden platform Declan's father had built the day before. My grandmother slow danced in her wheelchair. I held her hands and swayed while she hummed something old and beautiful that she couldn't quite remember the name of. Marcus stood up to give his best man speech. He loosened his tie, held up his glass and said, "I've known Declan for 15 years. I watched him build a company that's changing medicine. But he told me once, and he'll kill me for repeating this, that his greatest achievement was convincing Camille to go on a second date." Laughter. Applause. Declan shook his head, grinning. Then I caught something. A flicker. Declan glanced at his watch. 8:47 p.m. His jaw tightened. He looked at Marcus. Marcus gave a small nod. Something was happening that I didn't understand yet. Declan leaned in close, his lips near my ear, voice just below the music. "I need to tell you something." "Now?" "The documentary. The camera crew. It's Nexus TV, the actual network. They've been following me for 6 months. The episode airs tonight, at 9. I pulled back, looked at the cameras, the logo on the jacket. Nexus TV. Laura had been right. Declan, why is a national network filming your... Because the company isn't small, Camille. His eyes were steady, but his hands were shaking. There are some things about Mercergenics I should have told you sooner. About the scale. My mouth opened, closed. The clock on my phone read 8:52, 8 minutes until airtime. And 200 miles away, on a yacht on Lake Norman, someone was about to change the channel. He pulled me to the porch at the edge of the property, away from the music, away from the cameras. The air smelled like honeysuckle and cedar. Mercergenics isn't a small company, he said. We're going public next week. The current valuation is roughly $5 billion. I hold 38%. The number hung between us like a held breath. 5 billion. Yes. I stared at him. The flannel shirts, the dented truck, the rental house with the leaky faucet he fixed himself, the way he once spent 30 minutes comparing prices on paper towels at Costco. You drive a Ford F-150, I said, because apparently that was the detail my brain chose to process first. I like the truck. Declan, 5 billion. I know. You told me you had a small software company. I know that too. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't lie to protect myself. I lied, or I omitted, because you were the first person in my life who never looked me up, never Googled me, never asked about numbers. You asked me about valve algorithms and whether I'd read your paper on stent degradation. You saw me, the actual me. He paused. I was terrified that if you knew, it would change the one thing I can't afford to lose. I stood there, wind catching my veil, the faint sound of people dancing behind us. So the cameras, Nexus TV, a documentary special, The Quiet Billionaire. It airs in, he checked his watch, 6 minutes. And the whole country is going to watch our wedding? The farm, the vows, all of it. I closed my eyes, opened them. I married you for free, Declan. That hasn't changed. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 2 years. 9 o'clock. Across the country, televisions tuned to Nexus TV lit up with a title card, The Quiet Billionaire, Inside Mercergenics. The opening shot, a man in a flannel shirt walking through a glass-walled lab. Voiceover. Declan Mercer, founder of Mercergenics, a medical AI company valued at $5 billion, is one of America's wealthiest and least-known entrepreneurs. Then the cut, a farm at golden hour, string lights, wildflowers, a woman in a lace veil walking down a gravel aisle alone. Today, Mercer married biomedical engineer Camille Ashford at a small farm outside Raleigh, North Carolina. No press, no entourage, just family and close friends. On the yacht at Lake Norman, the bar television was tuned to Nexus TV, background noise. Nobody was watching, until someone was. A woman near the bar tilted her head at the screen, squinted, tapped her husband's arm. Hold on, is that Declan Mercer, the tech guy? They just said 5 billion. Todd turned, then froze. On screen, Declan standing at the altar, a close-up of his face as the bride approached. The narrator listed his net worth, his company, his portfolio. And then the bride filled the screen. A gasp traveled through the yacht like a current. My mother was mid-sentence when someone grabbed her arm and pointed. She looked up, saw me, in my grandmother's veil, walking alone, on national television. Her champagne glass trembled. My father pushed through the small crowd. He stood in front of the screen, jaw slack, reading the chyron. Declan Mercer, CEO, Mercergenics, $5 billion valuation. He did the math. I know he did. He was an insurance man. Numbers were his language. His face went white. And on the farm, I was dancing. I didn't see any of it. I didn't need to. The yacht went quiet the way a room goes quiet when someone says the wrong name at a funeral. My father stood 3 feet from the television, hands at his sides, watching a man he'd dismissed over pot roast get described by Nexus TV as one of the most consequential founders in medical technology. My mother fumbled for her phone, opened Google, typed Declan Mercer. The results loaded like a verdict. Forbes, Bloomberg, TechCrunch, MIT Technology Review. The same face, the flannel, the easy smile, the man she'd once called some IT fellow, staring back from the cover of a magazine she'd never bothered to read. Brianna materialized beside her, heels clicking fast. "Mom, is that Declan? Camille's Declan?" "Be quiet," my mother whispered. She was scrolling. Stock projections. IPO timeline. Board of directors. Margaret Vale, venture capital legend. The silver-haired woman Declan had introduced me to at the farm. The one my family would never meet. Todd stood off to the side. He wasn't looking at the TV anymore. He was staring at nothing, drink untouched, doing his own math. His lakefront development, $12 million, stalled, leveraged against loans he was already struggling to service. And the man he'd never thought twice about, the man whose father-in-law he'd borrowed status from, was worth $5 billion. 12 million versus 5 billion. The ratio was devastating. A guest approached my father with a grin that was half awe, half accusation. "Glenn, your son-in-law is a billionaire? And you're here?" My father didn't answer. Todd walked to the bow of the yacht, pulled out his phone, and made a call. His voice was tight, urgent, private. The yacht party continued, but the air had changed. The champagne tasted different when the punchline was, "You." My phone started buzzing during our first dance. I felt it against my hip, a persistent rhythmic vibration, like a second heartbeat. Declan felt it too. He raised an eyebrow. "Ignore it," I said. We kept dancing. A slow song, his hand on the small of my back, the fairy lights making everything soft. But when the song ended, I looked. 14 messages, 7 missed calls. My mother. "Where are you? You're on TV. Call me now." My father. "Camille, call me, now." Brianna. "OMG, OMG, OMG. Why didn't you tell us? We need to talk right now." My mother again. "I didn't know. Why didn't you say anything? Your family needs to talk about this. I love you, sweetheart." I love you. 3 words she hadn't texted me in over 2 years, and here they were, arriving not after my graduation, not after my patent, not after my engagement, but after a net worth figure scrolled across a television screen. I read every message, slowly. The way you read a verdict you already knew was coming. Declan stood beside me, didn't ask, didn't suggest, just waited. I looked up at him, at the farm, at my grandmother asleep in her wheelchair, exhausted and content, at Laura dancing with Marcus, at Declan's parents swaying under the oak tree. Then I looked back at my phone. I typed 1 character, sent it. To all of them. My mother, my father, my sister. 1 emoji, 1 reply. Then I locked my phone, slipped it into Laura's purse, and took my husband's hand. "Dance with me again." We danced until midnight. I never checked my phone once. For the first time in 31 years, I didn't need anyone to see me. I could finally see myself. By morning, the documentary had been watched by over 8 million people. The farm wedding segment became the most shared clip of the night. The internet did what the internet does. It found the seams. Someone screenshotted my mother's Instagram story from 4:32 p.m. The yacht, the champagne, the sunset caption, "Best night ever." They placed it next to a still from the documentary. Me, walking down the aisle alone, same timestamp. It went everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, Facebook groups for women over 40 who had opinions and weren't afraid of them. The comments were merciless. Her parents skipped her wedding for a yacht, and the groom turned out to be worth $5 billion. I could not write this. She walked alone. Her grandma was the only family there. I'm not crying. You're crying. The mom's IG story is still up. It wasn't. My mother deleted it by 11 p.m., but the screenshots were already immortal. Back at the farm, the party wound down gently. Guests hugged us goodbye. Declan's parents left with a quiet, "We're so proud of both of you." I found my grandmother still awake, barely, in her wheelchair near the dessert table, a plate of cake crumbs on her lap. Laura crouched beside her. "Ruth, did you see the show?" My grandmother looked at her like she'd asked a silly question. I didn't need to watch it on a screen. I was here. At 11 p.m., another text from my mother arrived. "I'm sorry, Camille. I didn't know. Please give me a chance." I read it. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because I was sitting in a field with my husband, under stars, full of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Enough. I finally felt enough. When I put my phone down that night, I felt lighter than I'd ever felt in 31 years. If this story is making you think of someone, a mother, a sister, a family member who made you feel like you were never quite enough, subscribe to this channel, because I believe real stories have power. And the next part, when my parents actually showed up at my front door, is something you'll want to hear. We're almost there. Stay with me. 1 week after the wedding, the doorbell rang. Declan and I were in the kitchen of our house, a simple 3-bedroom in a quiet Raleigh suburb, nothing that screamed billionaire, because neither of us wanted that. I opened the door. My parents, flowers, a bottle of wine, my mother's mascara already running. "We need to talk, sweetheart." I let them in. Not because I owed them anything, but because I was ready. We sat in the living room. Declan stayed in the kitchen, close enough to hear, far enough to let me own the conversation. My father spoke first, measured, practiced. "We made a mistake, Camille. I'll admit that." "Which part was the mistake, Dad?" I kept my voice level. "Missing my wedding? Or not knowing who Declan was?" The silence that followed was surgical. My mother jumped in. "We didn't know he was. We had no idea about the company, the money." "Mom," I leaned forward, "you didn't need to know who Declan was to come to your daughter's wedding. That's the problem. You didn't skip it because you were busy. You skipped it because you decided I wasn't worth the trip." She flinched. My father shifted in his seat. I watched him cycle through expressions: guilt, defensiveness, calculation, before settling on something I'd never seen from him, an attempt at strategy. "I understand," he said carefully, "and I'm sorry. But going forward, perhaps we can start fresh? I was thinking Declan and Todd might have some synergy, business-wise." There it was. 7 days after the most public humiliation of his life, my father sat in my living room and pitched a business connection. I let the word hang. Synergy. Like he was selling a term life policy instead of asking for forgiveness. "You just said synergy," I said. "You drove 3 hours to apologize, and you're already networking." My father's face reddened. "That's not..." "Dad, I analyze data for a living. Let me give you some." I folded my hands. "In the last 10 years, you've missed my master's graduation, my 25th birthday, my first patent filing, and my wedding. That's 4 major life events. 0 attendance." He opened his mouth. "The only time you've driven 3 hours to see me is right now, 1 week after finding out my husband is a billionaire. That's a data point, Dad, and data doesn't lie." My mother started crying. "How can you say that? I sacrificed everything for this family." "Mom, I'm not saying you're cruel. I'm saying you weren't there. Those are different things, and I'm tired." The room was still. Declan's footsteps in the kitchen had stopped. I stood up. "I'm not punishing you. I'm just done auditioning for a role you never planned to cast me in." My mother pressed a tissue to her face. My father stared at the floor. "I don't hate you," I said. "I don't want revenge. I don't even want an apology. Because an apology that only comes after a net worth reveal isn't an apology. It's a recalculation." I walked to the front door and opened it. Not violently, not dramatically. Just the way you open a door when a conversation is over and you've said everything that needs saying. Go home. And when you get there, ask yourselves, honestly, if Declan were an IT consultant making $60,000 a year, would you be standing in my living room right now? My father looked at me for a long moment. Then he took my mother's arm and walked out. Neither of them answered the question. I closed the door and leaned against it. Declan appeared in the hallway, coffee in each hand. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" or "You did the right thing." He just held out a mug and waited. "I don't feel good about that," I said. "You're not supposed to. That's how you know it was real." We sat on the couch. The house was quiet. Outside, I could hear my parents' car starting. A long pause before it backed out, the hesitation of people who'd expected a different outcome. Through the window, I watched them pull away. My mother's head was down. My father gripped the steering wheel with both hands. I'd later learn, from a cousin who heard it from an aunt who heard it from Judith herself, What happened in that car? They drove in silence for 20 minutes. My mother stared out the window. My father kept his eyes on the road. Then very quietly, my father said, "We lost her a long time ago. I just didn't realize." My mother didn't respond, but she didn't argue either. And for two people who had spent decades constructing an image of their family, that silence said more than any confession could. I don't know if that moment changed them. I don't know if it was regret or just the sting of being exposed. People are complicated that way, parents especially. Declan set his mug down. "What do you need right now?" "Nothing. I just need to sit here for a minute." "Then that's what we'll do." We sat there for a long time. The coffee got cold. The afternoon light shifted across the floor. And slowly, the tightness in my chest loosened. Not into happiness, not yet, but into something more valuable. Space. Room to breathe without performing. In Millbrook, the fallout was measured in whispers and empty chairs. At the country club, my father's usual table in the dining room felt different. The handshakes were shorter, the conversations thinner. People who'd spent years listening to Glenn Ashford talk about Todd's developments and Brianna's social calendar now had a new question, and they weren't shy about it. "So your son-in-law is Declan Mercer, the Declan Mercer, and you were on a yacht that night?" My father had no answer for that. He'd spent 30 years selling confidence. Now the product was defective and everyone could see it. 2 insurance clients pulled their portfolios within a month, not because of the wedding directly, but because, as one of them reportedly told a mutual friend, "If Glenn can't read his own son-in-law's worth, how's he reading my risk profile?" My mother quietly deleted every social media post from the yacht, but the internet had already archived them. A local blog ran a piece titled, "Millbrook Mom's Yacht Night, When a $5 billion Wedding is the Party You Don't Attend." She stopped going to the club for 3 weeks. Then Brianna called. Not to apologize. She was crying. Todd filed for bankruptcy. The lakefront project collapsed. The bank's calling in loans. Everyone's comparing him to Declan online and he can't. Her voice cracked. "Can you ask Declan to help? An investment? A loan? Anything?" I sat with that for a moment. The sister who called my wedding a little barn thing was now asking the barn groom for a bailout. "That's between Todd and his accountant, Brianna, not me. You can't just... You have access to... I have access to my own life. That's all I ever wanted." She hung up. I didn't call back. The math had finally changed. 3 weeks later, Mercergenics went public. The stock surged 40% on the first day. Financial networks ran the ticker like a scoreboard. Forbes put Declan on the cover. Flannel shirt, farm in the background. Headline, "The Flannel Billionaire. Why Tech's Quietest CEO Built a $7 billion company in secret." In the photograph, I was beside him. Not in a gown or heels, in my lab coat, holding a coffee, mid-laugh at something he'd said just before the shutter clicked. The caption read, "Mercer and his wife, biomedical engineer Camille Ashford, at their home near Raleigh." Our life didn't change the way people expected. We stayed in the same house. Declan still drove the F-150, though he added a new one for the longer trips. I still went to my lab every morning, still ran diagnostics on cardiac sensors, still argued with colleagues about polymer degradation rates. The Duke School of Engineering invited me to deliver the keynote at their annual graduation ceremony. I said yes. Not because of Declan's name, because of my patent portfolio and my published research. I made that clear to the committee, and they confirmed it in writing. "Your work on microsensor cardiac monitoring is what earned the invitation, Dr. Ashford, not your husband's stock price." I framed that email. My grandmother called the day the Forbes article came out. "I saw your picture in the magazine. I cut it out and put it on the fridge, right next to my pie contest ribbon from '84. High praise, Grandma." "Damn right." I thought that was the end of the story. The clean, neat ending where the credits roll and the scapegoat lives happily ever after. But 3 months later, Brianna sent me a message that changed the shape of things. The text arrived at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. Long, unedited, no emojis. "I know I don't deserve a reply, but I want you to know. Todd finalized the bankruptcy. It's done. Everything's gone. Mom and Dad blame him. And for the first time in my life, I understand what it feels like when they look at you and see disappointment. I read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I was trying to measure how much of it was real. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking Declan for anything. I'm asking if I still have a sister. I set the phone on the nightstand, stared at the ceiling. Declan's breathing was steady beside me, the rhythm of a man who slept like a person with a clean conscience. 3 months ago, my sister called my wedding adorable and then went to drink champagne on a yacht. Now her husband was bankrupt, her parents were scrambling for distance, and she was discovering what the second row felt like. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pity, either. I felt something between the two, a hollow, complicated ache for the sister I'd wanted her to be and the one she actually was. I typed back, "I'm sorry about Todd. I mean that. If you want to talk, really talk, not ask for anything, you can call me." Not forgiveness. Not a door flung open. Just a crack. And I held the key. A month later, my mother mailed a photograph. No letter, no explanation. Just a new frame on the living room wall. Me in my wedding dress, under the oak tree, veil catching the light. On the back, in her handwriting, "Should have been up years ago." I didn't reply. But I didn't throw it away either. 6 months after the wedding. I was sitting on the porch with my coffee, watching the morning settle over the yard. The azaleas were blooming. A cardinal landed on the fence post and stayed there, bright and unbothered, like it had all the time in the world. I didn't hate my parents. Hate takes energy, and I'd spent too many years pouring energy into people who treated it like tap water, abundant, unnoticed, free. I simply stopped accepting a relationship where I had to pass a test to be loved. My new rules were simple. I answered when I felt like answering. I visited when I was ready, not when I was summoned. I didn't explain myself. And I didn't apologize for building a life that made me happy without their approval. My grandmother Ruth passed away 4 months after the wedding. Peacefully in her sleep, the way she'd always said she wanted to go. No fuss, no machines, just lights out. Every anniversary, I wore her veil. Not the whole thing, just a ribbon of the lace pinned to my dress. She was the one person who never needed me to prove anything. She just sat in the front row and clapped. "That woman," Declan said once, "had more integrity in her wheelchair than most people have standing up." I started a small scholarship in her name at Duke for first-generation female engineering students who didn't have anyone in the front row. Declan came out to the porch that morning with 2 mugs. "What are you thinking about?" "That I'm happy. And this time, I don't need anyone to confirm it." He sat beside me. The cardinal flew off. The coffee was too hot. And for the first time in my life, nothing was missing. Not a single thing. People always ask me about the emoji. Why? Why not something angry? Why not a paragraph telling them off? Why not silence? Because anger means you still care about their opinion. Silence means you're still deciding. But laughter, real, unburdened laughter, means you've arrived somewhere they can't reach. That emoji wasn't revenge. It was release. The sound of a lock clicking open after 31 years. I think about that night sometimes. The fairy lights, the veil, the 4 empty chairs wrapped in ribbon that no one came to fill. I used to picture those chairs as proof of everything I'd lost. Now I see them differently. Last spring, I went back to Meadow Creek Farm. The owners let me walk the grounds. I stood where the chairs had been. Tall grass now. Wildflowers pushing through. I realized I didn't want those chairs filled anymore. I wanted the space. So here's what I'd tell you, if you're still listening. If you've spent years waiting for someone to hand you permission to be happy, to tell you you're enough, to show up, to choose you, stop waiting. Walk yourself down the aisle. Wear your grandmother's veil. Say your vows to the person who sees you. And if the people who were supposed to be there call afterward, panicked and breathless, wondering where you are, you don't owe them a speech. You don't owe them tears. You don't even owe them anger. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Or one emoji, sent with a full heart and both hands free. I don't keep empty chairs anymore. I plant flowers where they used to be, And if they ever come back, really come back, not for the money, but for me, they'll have to find their own seat. I'm done saving them one. Thank you for staying until the end. My story's done, but yours might just be starting. If you've ever had to draw a line with family, or if you're still caught between love and self-respect, drop a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more about the Christmas my parents tried to show up unannounced, or about the woman who married her boss's boss and her family only found out on live television, the links are in the description. Subscribe, hit the bell. I'll see you next time.